Hi all you Savvy Naturalistas. Today I received the email from a reader named Jen, and it goes like this. Jen asks, can I use sugar-free powder in any recipe? And if so, will the results be the same as using regular powdered sugar? And also, can I replace coconut sugar with Splenda? Thanks, Jen, for your email. So I'll talk a little bit about Stevia and Splenda in powder form, and then I'll get into coconut sugar. Now I want to say this. I like Splenda. I know you anti-Splenda people out there are going to get on me for liking Splenda, but personally for me, it tastes much better than Stevia, because not only do you have to use less Stevia in a recipe, because Stevia tends to have alcohol flavor, but you just don't have to do as much with Splenda as you have to do with Stevia. Now, I know there are pros and cons to using Splenda, and I've read all the research on the cons of Splenda, but I just have never had any of those effects happen to me, so I just like Splenda. I'm sorry. So please, you anti-Splenda people, just don't be mad at me for this, okay? So, for liking Splenda. Okay, so let's get into the powder forms of Splenda and Stevia. They tend to be a bit more drier than regular sugar, so they take a little longer to dissolve into a product you're using. So let's say you wanted to make a buttercream frosting or an icing, and the recipe calls for 1 cup butter, 1 cup sugar, and a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Of course, you replace the sugar with a sugar substitute, and you will whip it up, and there goes your butter frosting, right? Well, that doesn't too much happen with Splenda or Stevia. You would have to either reduce the amount of Splenda and Stevia you use, or you would have to add more butter. So if you're using it in a buttercream or a frosting, just make sure you know that you would either have to reduce or add when it comes to the other ingredients. That's what I've personally found out. Also, Stevia and Splenda tend to be a bit more taffy-like. They'll get hard real quick, then they'll get soft real quick. It just all depends. It's not like sugar, you know. Sugar can't be replaced by any sugar substitute. There are certain things sugar can do that sugar substitutes can't do. So just make sure you know that just those simple things when you're making buttercream frostings and icings. Also, the color. Let's say you make a drink, your favorite drink, and you want to use a sugar-free substitute, the color will be off. So if you're into making a drink for your friends at a get-together and you're expecting the exact same color from a recipe you saw online, it won't be that color, because the way the sugar substitutes tend to be, their color is a darker white versus sugars. It's just your recipe will be a different color. Now when it comes to baking, any type of baking, if you're baking cupcakes, pies, whatever you're baking, you don't have to worry about any of that. Your sugar substitutes work well. Only when it comes to Stevia, you probably have to lessen how much Stevia you use so you don't get an alcohol flavor, because for me, I don't get an aftertaste. What I taste is an alcohol flavor. So that's all you have to worry about when you're dealing with baking. Now let's get into things that do not work at all with the sugar substitutes. From my personal experience, what I've noticed, when you're making an angel food cake, will not happen. It just won't happen. You'll get a brownie. If you like an angel food cake brownie, you'll get that. Also, you know, angel food cakes are a bit moist when you bite into them, especially when they're warm. Not with a sugar substitute, you won't get a moist cake. You'll get a very dry cake. It won't be gritty now, and it won't crumble, but it'll just be dry. Also, you know how a sugar cake, an angel food cake stays, it stays the way the shape stays in the cake pan. It's not going to happen with a sugar substitute. It will actually just flatten out, and that's it. That's like I said, you'll get a brownie. Now let's get into let's get into meringue cookies. Now when you're using when you're making meringue cookies, these cookies tend to be a bit more fluffy when you squeeze them out and you put them on your baking sheet, and then when you bake them, they tend to be a bit more hard. And not with sugar substitutes. Your cookies are not going to be hard at all. Your cookies are going to be flat and chewy, and they'll have an egg flavor. It's not a pretty cookie at all. I mean, if you like it, it's a good cookie, but for me, what I've experienced is sugar works best in anything where you're whipping egg whites up. I've never had a problem with sugar and whipping egg whites. Now when you're doing it with the sugar substitute, you will have a problem. It's just something about sugar that egg whites like, and there's something about sugar substitutes that egg whites don't like. Now I don't know if it's because the sugar substitute is a bit more drier, because what happens is once you pour your sugar substitute into your whipped egg whites, the egg whites tend to be a bit more the egg whites tend to just evaporate back into egg whites. They don't whip up into the fluffy egg white you're used to, or the meringue. They don't whip up into the meringue. Also, now let's talk about my favorite Italian cookie, which, well, I have a lot of favorites, but this one I really love. It's an amaretti cookie, like the Italians say amaretti. And with an amaretti cookie, if you're using a sugar substitute, because as many of you know, if you know what an amaretti cookie is, it's a gluten-free cookie. It's just almond flour, sugar, and egg whites, or almonds. You can actually grind up almonds to make this cookie, egg whites, and sugar. Now, if you're replacing your sugar with a sugar substitute, your amaretti cookie will not be chewy, because a traditional amaretti cookie is hard on the outside and it's this fluffy chewy on the inside. It's like a coconut macaroon, to be honest with you, except it's a bit more hard and crispy on the outside. Your amaretti cookie will not taste like it will just not, it's not good at all. Even with coconut sugar, I've tried to make it with coconut sugar and it just didn't turn out right. Now speaking of coconut sugar, let's talk a little bit about coconut sugar. Now, when you're making cakes, pies, anything with baking, sugar substitutes, any type tend to work well. But when you're getting into making meringues, it's not going to happen with coconut sugar at all. Coconut sugar tends to be a bit more dense. And since it's so dense, the meringues just fall apart. It's just not going to be fluffy at all. You're going to have soup. It's a flavor soup. So if you're into that, then go ahead and make your meringue soup, but in the oven. But it's just, coconut sugar is just very heavy. Even if you blend it up to make a powder, it's a difficult sweetener to work with because it's so dense. Now, coconut sugar, I will say it dissolves in water, not as quick as sugar, but it does dissolve. So let's say you want to make like a caramel sauce. Coconut sugar works perfect in situations with caramel sauce. Also, palm sugar. Now, palm sugar and coconut sugar are two different sugar substitutes. I know people like to say they're the same. They are not. If you want to know a little bit more, I'll post a link to an article I actually wrote about the differences between palm sugars and coconut sugar. I'll leave the links down at the bottom. The palm sugar is actually lower in calories than coconut sugar as well. but it's higher in carbs. So you have to be careful. There's not a lot of research on palm sugar because everyone thinks it's coconut sugar. But once you know that it's not, I just hope someday that people do more research on palm sugar so we can know how high it is on the glycemic index and all the other stuff. Now, you can make brittles. Palm sugar makes a wonderful brittle. I've made lots of brittles with palm sugar. I've never had a problem with it. As I've talked about in the posts, you can make jams, candies. Palm sugar is wonderful for all types of heating it up and whipping it in. You can make spun sugar. It's just a really great sugar substitute for that type of stuff, but not so much for baking. So coconut sugar is baking, and then palm sugar is not baking. So I really, if you want to replace the Splenda and Stevia with coconut sugar to make the powdered sugar substitute, you can go ahead and do that, but you probably won't get the same results. Now, that would say this before I let you guys go. Please remember that coconut sugar and regular sugar has the same amount of calories. Coconut sugar will stall your weight loss. I've had it happen to me where I'll put a tablespoon of coconut sugar in my oat bran, and then I'll add another tablespoon and another one. And then by the time I've added all these calories to my oat bran, because I just wanted the caramel notes of the coconut sugar. So just make sure you watch your tablespoons and your teaspoons when you're using coconut sugar, because like I said, just because it's healthy and just because it's a lovely color doesn't mean you can have more of it than you would regular sugar. In that case, you might as well just have regular sugar. But you know, sugar makes you happy and then you'll want more, and coconut sugar doesn't make you as happy as regular sugar does. So you really don't want more of it, but you still want that sweet flavor in what you're eating, and sometimes it just adds calories. Now, that's all I have for you guys today. Make sure you check out my store at savvynaturalista.com to get you something nice to make you feel good, because we all know if you feel good, you look good. And have a great day. Ciao!